is the ethics revolution, the last one I'm going to share with you tonight. And it's driven by people like you. When I go to universities, I am so impressed with the questions that get asked about means versus ends. Do we spend so much time playing with the gadgets that we don't have any time to think about what we're producing? Are we just building faster machines to take us nowhere? It's students often that ask the questions about the law of unintended consequences. Do we give enough thought to the future implications of present-day technologies? It's students, in my experience, who most often ask the questions about the line between human and machine. As we invite technology into our bodies through nanobots and biochips, will we lose the line between humanity and technology? Is that even important anymore? And there are reasons why it is students that are leading this push for a new ethic. And I just need to say a couple of things quickly to help you understand what I mean by that. Many of you tonight are part of what some of us, for want of a better term, call the millennial generation. Now, I know that a lot of millennials don't like being called millennials any more than I like being called a baby boomer. But the only reason we have to give you a generic name is because although everybody's an individual, every generation has a biography, and by sharing certain experiences during a certain period of time, we develop something like common characteristics. And we call you millennials only because the first level, the first age, my eldest daughter is at the top end of millennials. She came of age at the turning of the millennium. That's where the term came from. That's all it means. So don't get hung up on the word. I just use it for want of something better. Generically speaking, people between the ages of about 22 and 36 in Europe, we classify as millennials, are quite optimistic in comparison with the generation that went before them. They're also very talented, particularly in the area of the digital, but not just in that area. It's a very resourceful generation globally in the developed world today. In 2016, in the US alone, millennials had a combined spending power of 200 billion American dollars. That's an awful lot of money. And by 2020, just 3 years from now, millennials, if you're a millennial, rejoice, you will have more spending power than even baby boomers, which is saying a lot. You're a large generation if you're a millennial. By 2025, 3 out of 5 workers on the planet will be millennials. That's great opportunity, isn't it? And great responsibility, of course. It's also an innovative generation. 46% of millennials in a recent survey globally said, I want to start my own business. Now, you would expect that in America. Everybody wants to start their own business in the United States of America. God bless America. But in Europe, it's not traditionally the way things are. And yet over 46% in the European region said, I want to have my own business. Following you, though, our Generation Edge. Now, some people call it Generation Z, but that's stupid. Who wants to be part of Generation Z when Zs are usually associated with sleep? Who wants to be Generation Sleep, the soporific generation? The guys coming after some of you, maybe some of your younger brothers and sisters, are Generation Edge, and they're quite different to you. They're a reformist generation. The other day in the American newspapers, there was a picture of a young girl, 14 years of age, holding up a sign addressed to President Trump, saying this: if you build a wall, my generation will pull it down. That is Generation Edge. It's not rebellious because it's cool to be rebellious and nihilistic and anarchistic. It's rebellious because it wants to bring reform. It is also a pragmatic generation more than millennials. Millennials by nature usually, at least in collectives, are very idealistic. Great, big picture, blue skies thinkers, and that's what I love about millennials. But these guys are more pragmatic. Thanks for telling us the vision, millennials, really appreciate that. But we want to know how it's going to work. How can we actually make this happen? And they're a conservative generation when it comes to some ethical issues. Did you know that the rates of drug abuse and alcohol abuse in the United Kingdom among teenagers have gone down significantly in the last 10 years? And there's no sociological reason we can find for this, and no economic or political factor we can attribute this to. The only reason seems to be a change in generational attitudes. So it's a little more conservative on some ethical issues. And this is important. You are at the forefront of the search for a new ethic, and it will be revolutionary in the next 10 to 15 years in politics, in business. Do you know in America today, a growing number of businesses, mainly driven by millennials, are switching from return on investment as a measure of success to what they now call return on community. So they're no longer saying a successful business is one that just makes bucks. They're saying a successful business is one for whom the primary value is adding value to the community. That's very significant in a Western capitalist system. The very nature of capitalism is changing today because of this new ethic. Why are Uber and Airbnb always in the courts in Europe? Is it because they're bad people? No, it's because the government doesn't know how to structure and regulate something that isn't institutional. We've had for decades and even centuries an institutional economic model, driven by institutions that are approved by government. But now people are doing things person to person through digital and so on, and that's a lot harder for government to regulate. It's opening up a whole new understanding of what ethics means, based on things like the sharing economy. In London, where I'm from, you can own a car, a bicycle, an electric bicycle. You can own a motor scooter. You can own an apartment. Even a room within an apartment can be share-owned. Education is share-owned. Last year, for the first time, we not only had the massive open online course, but the massive open mobile course, where you can do an entire stream of an accredited degree course on a phone, and at the end, be given a nano degree. That's what they call it. Oh, it sounds kind of sexy to me. I'd like one of those. The reason why Millennials and Gen Edgers between them are driving the ethic revolution and will continue to do so over the next 10 years, I hope that's true, is because you put a premium on trust. Think about it. Almost everything you do online, and because of you we now do online, has the trust as its currency. Trust isn't just a commodity like it was in the age of eBay. Now it's a currency. You can't trade without trust. And the Edelman Communications Group every year conducts a survey. 33,000 people in 28 countries are quizzed about how much they trust public institutions. So it looks at the relative levels of public trust in public institutions like government, like media, like the energy sector, like education and academia. And these two graphs on this slide show you where the Netherlands is situated. First of all, on the far right, on your far left, is the informed public. That's you. People who are in touch with the world, reading a lot, listening to the news, engaging. 62% of people in the Netherlands who are engaged with change say they trust public institutions across the board. That is the median across the board, all public institutions, 62%. That may sound high to you, but in global terms it isn't, 62%. In the mass population, outside of you, the people who maybe aren't as engaged as you, 52%. It's even lower. Now this is important, and the Edelman people said this year, this reflects a global implosion of trust, the lowest ever ratings we've ever seen globally, they said. High trust means capacity to act. Some of you are going to lead businesses. Some of you are going to lead media organizations. Some of you will be leaders in academic fields. Some of you will lead new technologies. And I'm thankful for what you will do. But as leaders, the amount of trust you engender in others is the thing that gives you the right to influence people. People will allow you to influence their lives and produce change through your services and products only if you have a high degree of trust. What interested me in the Netherlands this year was that people felt that CEOs should be personally visible in discussing financial results, 69%, but 77% said CEOs should be more visible in discussing economic inequality, for example, or public policy. We left that to the politicians for too long. If you're a business leader, here today, or a business leader in the making, you have a big role to play in shaping societal issues. I don't have time to go into that. I think we learn a lot from Mandela. How many find Nelson Mandela still a very inspiring character? I learned so much from watching this man from a distance. I've been going to South Africa for 26 years. I've seen a lot of changes. But this man embodied what we're talking about here, because he knew that trust is made up of three things. First of all, your personal expertise. If you are a leader of anything, you have to be able to do what you purport to do. You have to be good at what you do. That's obvious. The second is your integrity. Are you who you claim to be? And the third, which is often left out, is your commitment to the common good. Mandela never claimed to be the president of Black South Africa, though he could have done. He never claimed to be the president of coloured South Africa, as they used to call it, though he could have done. He claimed his only interest was representing all South Africans, even those who previously had no time for him. This is what we call in civic circles the common good. It is essential to trust. People need to know whatever it is you lead, that you're not just there for those who like you and those who use your services and products. That you're there in some degree anyway for the wider population. And I do believe, if you're a leader in the making here tonight, or already in leadership, the most urgent question you can ask is, what kind of city do I want to live in 10 years from now? And what can I do to set that in motion? It was a chilly day, December 1989, and the downtrodden people of Bucharest, the capital of Romania, had just listened to yet another self-serving, long-winded speech by their dictator leader, Nicolae Ceausescu. The president was standing in his favorite venue, the balcony overlooking Palace Square. Normally, at the end of his speech, the people would rise and begin to applaud him loudly under the watchful eye of the security services, in the same way that people do in North Korea today. But on this particular occasion, Ceausescu was shocked because people began to shout up at him, "Ceausescu dictator, Ceausescu dictator, Ceausescu dictator," over and over again. The protests had begun 1 month earlier in a small town outside Bucharest, where an Hungarian church leader, a priest, who had many young people in his congregation, many university students, had begun to call on the government for reform in a peaceful way. The government, feeling threatened, told him that they were going to exile him not just from his church, not just from his town, but from his family. The students rose up and began to demand change. A few weeks later, back in the capital, tens of thousands of them took to the streets and filled the main square outside the Communist Party headquarters, the central party building. Ceausescu, as he'd done before, sent the army out to tackle them. Some were killed, but when the tank commanders were ordered to fire their tanks on the young students, they lifted their cannon in the air as a sign of solidarity. At that instant, Nicolae Ceausescu knew his days were numbered, his time was up. He and his wife took up to the roof of the building, took a short helicopter ride into history, but were dead a few hours later. And an award-winning journalist made his way into the city with a young man, his driver, taking him from the airport. And on the trip into town, he said to this young man, "What exactly is going on in your city right now?" And this young man, in a very self-effacing way, said, "Why, it's just a small revolution in a small place." And it was a small revolution in a small place, but it sent ripple effects across Europe. Other dictators suddenly knew their days were numbered too. It was all driven by students. As in history, this is often the case. I don't believe I'm speaking to the future leaders of the Netherlands or Europe tonight. I believe I'm speaking to the near future leaders of the Netherlands and Europe tonight. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, as of this week, is 37 years of age, not that much older than many of you. The Austrian president today is in his 30s. He was 27 when he first became the foreign minister of that country. The Canadian president, likewise, a very young man. You are not the future leaders of this country. You're the very near future leaders of this country. And it's my hope, and indeed it's my prayer, that you will have the courage, the wisdom, the vision, the insight, the strategy to shape the future before it shapes you. Thanks for listening.
Wow. That's a great story to end. I was like, got chills. Wow.